Welcome to William Steele True Crime and Still a Spotlight TV, radio, and public relations now. You guys know who I am, so we're going to get right to the chase here. I'm back with my guest host, Ignacio Esteban. Ignacio is a retired ATF agent. Go figure. I used to run guns. He used to arrest people like me.
Bill, what's going on, man?
Thank you. Welcome back to the show.
Good to be back, man. Had a little R&R in Florida. I'm well rested and ready to hit it back and do some good shows again.
There you go. So we're glad to have him back. Now we're going to jump right into current affairs, crazy cases in the news.
Unbelievable.
So let's start off with this gigantic serial killer case in New York. Gilgo Beach serial killer, Rex Uerman.
What's Long Island Beach killer, man? Yeah, I'm just shocked. You know, these guys all like typical living double lives, right? Like a Bundy, living with, she was living with a serial killer for years, or Dahmer having his work, but yet at night he does, typical Jekyll and Hyde, right? These are Jekyll and Hyde's normal lives, and then at night they commit House of Horrors. And what I was seeing, at least 3, maybe 4, could be higher the number. I mean, it's just atrocious way these guys kill. And a lot of these guys have a affection for this. They really enjoy killing, especially young ladies or minors or children. John Wayne Gacy, I think he lived the ultimate double life, right? He had a construction company. He brings in his boys in, and then he kills them. But he didn't, at least this guy, he would get rid of the body somewhere else. Dahmer would have tried to dismember it and get rid of it. Gacy kept it in his house, the basement of his house, in the crawl space.
You and I just did a story about serial killers. You have a book out about it. Check out Ignacio's book,
Psycho Killers.
Psycho Killers. And I also have a book about what I believe to be the wealthiest serial killer in American history, Robert Durst. You'll see these books on the screen. Links are in the description. Circling back to this Gilgo Beach serial killer, Rex. Now, this guy was an accountant, very prominent accountant. Not accountant, architect in Manhattan, a Fifth Avenue architect. They arrested him at his office. And some of the evidence that led to his case, as they zeroed in on this guy, they were able to have him as a suspect on their radar. And they had discarded DNA, which is admissible in court. If you discard something, a cup or whatever, a lot of times detectives will get you to drink a cup of coffee so they can tell you you're free to go, but then you leave your cup on that table. Now it's discarded. They'll run your DNA. So he was eating pizza, put it out. They grabbed it. They photographed it, chain of custody, tested it. It's linked back to hairs and fibers on the murder victims.
Yeah, that's good.
Then they have his cell phones and their phones, and his cell phones were burner phones, and they have the video proof of him going in the stores and paying cash for burner phones. They have them from the store, the same phone that was linked to the location of her phone, at least in one of the cases.
One of them.
The evidence hasn't come out yet, but they did a hell of an investigation, 13 years to try to catch this guy.
Yeah, and when I was reading, that's too long. I mean, this guy's out there. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes that long to catch these killers. I mean, you had D'Angelo, who was killing for years, former police officer from California, right? He was the original Night Stalker, and he was killing for. He started as a burglar, then a serial rapist, then he evolved, and of course he would blame later. It wasn't him doing it; it was his alter ego. I think he named it Jerry or Charlie was doing it. He didn't do it. It's like O.J. Simpson. If you watched his so-called confession, he said O.J. couldn't do this. O.J. couldn't, and pretty much implying it was someone else, not O.J. that killed his ex-wife and Ron Goldman that was there. So a lot of people
they're grasping at straws. They're trying to get some kind of mental health defense or something.
Yeah. So I don't know what this guy's excuse is going to be. I mean, all these guys come up with, insanity. There's one guy that was actually Owens. He was on death row in Florida for 40 years. He finally was executed a few weeks ago out of Rayford. It wasn't Old Sparky. It was lethal injection. They got rid of Old Sparky, but they finally took care of that guy.
I had a guest on. I just released that show today. Her name is Tracy. She lives in the Massapequa area, not far from this serial killer. She had a struggle with drug addiction after getting addicted to painkillers. She's putting out a book. We're going to cover that. So shout out to Tracy for being a survivor and pulling through after she got out of prison. She finds me an inspiration of all people. I don't know. I just feel I'm just being me. But anyway, so she was on my show, and her reaction when they arrested this guy was visceral because her and her friends lived in deathly fear of running into him or somebody like him because this was not solved for so long. We're going to put some pictures of the victims up on the screen in memory of them. Our prayers go out and thoughts go out to their family members. So far, I think he's charged with 3 murders, One's coming soon. Hopefully,
fourth one coming up.
Total of 17 or more victims and
Could
bodies.
be. Could be.
Suspect there might have been actually a dumping ground for other serial killers. The same exact desolate beach.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. With Long Island, right? Long Beach, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue to stay on that case. I know that some people found some court records and sent them to me, and the bail application listed all of his searches, stuff that probably shouldn't have been publicized, but it came out, and all of his internet searches were like for things that are so horrible I can't even say them on the show without risking getting shut down. But you can imagine what it is, and it involved, minors and this and that and horrible acts. So this is a news and entertainment channel, but we're covering breaking news. We're trying to tell it from an insider's perspective, and people have some really good insights on these things. Me as a former prison law clerk, and Ignacio as law enforcement.
Yeah, I'll also look to see how much did the family know. I was reading an article about that, and how much did they know and did not know. So I'm reading what I heard, that the wife's hair fibers were also found on the victims.
That could be just transference, unless she's into weird kinky stuff and got did some stuff with him.
It could be, but just keep an eye on that, because maybe they were involved together, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll see how that plays out.
I'm not accusing anybody on the show. We're just alleging, and repeating what's being reported in the media. And obviously, if she or anybody else is involved, they can expect to be in prison for the rest of their lives.
It's going to be a fascinating investigation to see how far it goes in there. Those are things people are looking at and see how it plays out. But we'll see how this plays out. I mean, it's unbelievable. Her living with a serial killer like that, unbelievable. It happened, like I said, with Bundy. The same with Gacy.
They've had the entire street where he lives in Massapequa, Long Island, New York, locked down for the last several days, still bringing stuff out of his house. And I saw
it's going to be interesting what comes out.
I saw on the news this morning there was over 200 guns so far brought out of there. And then I saw interviews with him where he told an interviewer, he said, how I deal with troublesome people when, vendors or this or that? He said, with the hammer, they get the hammer. And he said, if they don't respond to seeing the hammer, then he said, I'm not going to say what I do with a hammer. Yeah. Standing is down. Now they got all his tools looking for DNA on
them. Because a lot of these guys, I mean, Bundy was the same thing. He used a crowbar. They like to kill quietly. They weren't going to use a gun and make noises. A lot of these guys were good with a knife. They're good with a hammer. They're knocking the head. And that's what he would do with his victims, especially females. Quickly hit them in the head and then strangle them later. And he would do horrible things. So, we're definitely keep an eye on this guy and see how this plays out for sure.
Yes, we are. Now, let me roll right into a case I'm intimately familiar with.
Sure.
Charles Smith, Elkhart, Indiana. I got out of prison. I ran into this guy who claimed to be the wealthiest citizen, the only billionaire in Elkhart. Turns out he's a serial swindler. He is a con artist, tried to sell us a house he didn't own, tried to sell my girl a cure for leukemia that he said he got from Tibet. We looked into it. Turns out he's been sued over this before, and he's tried to sell fake cancer cures before. We've then looked into many of his victims and their family members and found out that many people connected to him that he's ripped off, and even family members have turned up dead under extremely suspicious circumstances. Not publicly accusing him of murder. However, he has boasted in front of me and others that he killed Trina McCreary, and he has somehow ended up on recordings admitting to this. So he's now in jail, actually headed to prison.
He got sentenced, right, for a couple of years?
Yes, sir. It was wire fraud. He ended up getting 24 months
couple of years, yeah.
Prison with 36 months release. And he had another hit list of about, I think it was 8 or 9 people, victims and intended victims or witnesses against him. It's an extensive list. And he was recorded making death threats against them.
Okay. And this is out of South Bend, Indiana, right? He was sentenced federal court.
Right. It just happened just where we happened to move, right after coming out of the
a few years ago. Yeah.
Yep. So he was a bragger and a boaster, and he did have the biggest house in Elkhart, right on the river, historical house, renovated. Dozens, I believe, of Harley Davidson motorcycle, tricked out vehicles. He had everything. He'd have a stack of $100 bills in his pocket like this. On one account, a neighbor saw there was a big ring of people stealing catalytic converters. And he was, at the time he was on bond, or slightly before, according to a neighbor, spotted with a gigantic ball like this of melted platinum.
Mm.
So he's been hiding assets from the government. He got caught lying in court more than once. He lied at his detention hearing, committed perjury about his whereabouts. He said he was bedridden for 3 years, yet he was in South Florida. He was in Tennessee. He was in Chicago. He was on video surveillance cameras pushing vehicles, fine, not bedridden. So he got caught in perjury. He's probably going to be charged with that. He's probably going to be charged with murders. The judge, he tried to get 45 days to self-surrender. The judge at the hearing, after hearing all the recordings and all the threats and the suspicion of murders, said no way and took him into custody immediately. He's
Ran into custody immediately. That's good. 24 months, Bureau of Prison, and we'll see where he ends up.
Yep.
A lot of places he can go.
Yeah. So that's an unfortunate case. Our prayers go out to Lisa and her family and the other ones who suspect that Charlie may have killed their loved ones.
And we'll see what happens with the possible murder cases against him, right?
Yeah. He took me as a friend. They're the best friend I ever had. He's going to be my benefactor. Next thing you know, he's trying to lure me into committing crimes with him. And I said, I've already told you, I'm out of prison. I have a TV show, a true crime channel. I'm not the guy I was 20 years ago when I went to prison.
You don't want to go back.
I don't want to be involved with whatever you're involved with, man. Leave me out of it. Anyway, that's the story of him. We're going to keep tabs on the case. And I think some of his co-conspirators may be going to jail. We'll see.
That's interesting. We'll keep an eye on him. Charles Ray Smith, right?
Yep, Charles Ray Smith, Elkhart, Indiana. And if you're from Tennessee, you're South Florida, Chicago, if you know that name, I'll throw the picture up here a few times. Contact South Bend Field Office of the FBI. And if he's victimized you or somebody around you is turned up dead and he's a suspect, please let them know.
For sure. Absolutely.
He had pictures of dead bodies all over his phone. And he'd date women and get them high and drunk and then start filming them when they weren't paying attention and spread them to his friends.
That sounds like Dahmer. Dahmer used to take pictures after he dismembered his victims and put them in the bathroom. That's how he got caught at the end.
These are just horrible human beings. It's incredible that they have no compassion, no compunction in what they do.
That's how Dahmer got caught at the end, because the only victim that ever escaped was able to sneak through because he was going back and forth in the bathroom, and he was one of his stupors because he would drink a lot heavily. He was an alcoholic, and he told him before he was going to cut his heart and eat it, right? So that kind of gets the guy's attention, and he went to handcuff him. And he knows that the victim says if he let him handcuff him, he knew he was dead. He was going to kill him. So he kept on telling him to go to the bathroom, and he liked to play a scene from The Exorcist. I think it was the third one, and that scene that would trigger him, right? So he knew he was watching him transform right in front of him. He kept on going back and forth in the bathroom. Now, he was a little stronger than most of his victims, and he noticed once he was in a stupor, he was up to run in the door. Dahmer grabbed him, but he punched him as hard as he could right in the face. Boom, and knocked him down. He was up to get out the door. He calls the local police. Remember, months earlier, led another victim back to Dahmer, right? Milwaukee Police Department, a boy from Laos.
Right.
They didn't do the homework and everything else, and I talked about that. So this time they go in and do a little bit better job, obviously. And they tell him, hey, listen, why is this guy handcuffed? Where's the key? What's going on? He said, oh, the key's in the bedroom. Let me get it. I said, no, I'm going to go get it. So he goes in the bedroom, and that's when he sees the Polaroids that Dahmer had left out of all these dead bodies. Remember, and then they start looking around, and they start noticing different skulls and stuff all over. And they really something's up. And they say, hey, grab this partner. And once they grab him, he fought him, took him down, arrested him, and the rest was history.
Did Dahmer put up a fight when they tried to arrest him?
They tried to. Yeah, he did. But they threw him down, and it wasn't much of a fight. It wasn't much of a fight. He tried. It wasn't much of a fight. He was done, and the rest is history. And then that search warrant goes into history on the Oxford Apartments. He has these 55-gallon drums with dismembered bodies with torsos inside. It's unbelievable. You watch that. Those apartments, by the way, a year later, were demolished.
Good. Now, we're putting out these stories for educational purposes, newsworthy, and to try to educate the public. I was a former prisoner, law clerk, nonviolent offender. Ignacio was in federal law enforcement, busting bad guys and violent offenders mostly. And so this is for informational purposes only, and we're putting this out there. We're going to roll right into the Scott Peterson.
Scott Peterson, unbelievable.
Those who don't know
who is Scott Peterson? He's the resource officer at the Parkland High School, which is Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, right? High school in Parkland, Florida, South Florida, in Broward County. He was there for years. And when Nicholas Cruz went in there and come in House of Horrors on February 14th, 2000, this is the second Valentine's Day massacre, right? The first one you think with Al Capone out there in Chicago. This is the second one. This enormous, horrible, almost more of a death count. 17 people killed out there, and he did nothing. He sat in the back. Active, shooter training is you go in there, even if it's by yourself, you have a firearm, right? These kids have nothing. The teachers have nothing. They're trying to fight this guy who has an AR-15 style rifle, killing kids left and right, killing the teachers. And he stayed outside. He called radio backup, but they didn't go inside. You look the way it was done right in Nashville. You look what happened in Kentucky, right? We had a transgender killer out there in the school, her former school that she was into. She's killed this
very brave. They went right in and killed the person.
They listened to where the gunfire was coming from. They kept tracking it until they found her and addressed her and killed her, right? And the same thing happened in Kentucky at the bank in Louisville. The same thing happened there, right? That's the right way of doing things. The wrong way of doing it what happened there. He stayed outside, and he left. He was able to even escape, and is found later. He went to Subway. He hangs out at the Subway, and then he goes somewhere else until they finally get him. So he's gone for I think over 30 minutes after the shooting goes on, right, killing 17 people. That he should never been able to walk out of that high school.
I know that well because I've lived in South Florida. Coral Springs is the adjoining
right there. Yeah.
And for my audience, Parkland with this massacre, you probably often heard of it, is literally, I don't know, 10-minute drive from Fort Lauderdale on a good day. It's right there in the same county on the east coast of Florida. It's a very affluent community. It's a beautiful school. What have they done with that building ultimately? Is that still standing? Because it was almost a new school. It was relatively new.
Yeah, no, I think kids went back to school there. That's hard.
Yeah, they're not going to tear down a brand new building.
No, they're not going to tear it down. They went to school there, and that's harder. And of course, it's been over 5 years, so all those kids are gone now, right? That were there, that they happened. But still, it's like Columbine, right? This has become a worse shooting than what happened in Columbine,
right?
And just think about that. And this was two, and this was just one kid, right? He was crazy, mental health issues, obviously, and he should have been convicted in death row. And he wasn't. He sentenced to life. So that's one strike against the family. They were livid that Cruz did not get, death penalty. And then on top of that, this guy Peterson, after going trial, being charged with child neglect, not doing his job, the jury found him not guilty of all counts. And again, another blow for the family. And then if you haven't seen the pictures, the video, him sobbing there, he said, "Now I get my life back." Well, and like
how insensitive.
Now, and the family said, "You know what? We never get our kids back."
Right.
We'll never get our kids back. So that's hard.
The video when that happened, he was like peeking around the corner, but he wasn't going in. He was supposedly waiting for backup. He would not go in the school.
He didn't go into school. He at least go in the school, help the victims, get kids out of there, do something proactive, because that's what we have to do. And actual training is if it's just you there, but there were other detectives in the corner, in the perimeter, other officers that could have helped out. And later, Coral Springs does respond, and other small municipalities respond. You go in there with those guys. Not like Uvalde, Texas. That was another disaster. What happened there? Robb Elementary. They stayed out 77 minutes. Another disaster there. But that would happen years later. So there's Pulse nightclub is another one. That was a disaster. A lot of people, 50 people, were killed in Orlando. Right? They took too long waiting for the SWAT team. Well, they had enough people in there to go in and get the guy, and that was more of a terrorist act than a guy, an active shooter. So, man, there's ways they've done well. And they have not done so well. If you wait, the victims are going to get executed and killed. Columbine.
Now, even with my background, I believe that citizens who don't have any violent convictions, not mentally ill or on drugs, should be allowed to have guns. And in schools, you should have a trained individual or two with guns, because
and school
who has the training, who can immediately neutralize the threat.
And hopefully they respond. Unlike this resource officer who's there, he didn't respond. He sat outside.
It's just common sense, I think Florida started to do open carry now. Like if people can carry their guns into stores or whatever. I know a lot of.
I don't like that part. I like conceal. I think if you're not in law enforcement, you be concealed. If you are in law enforcement, then that's fine, because some people get intimidated. We were walking up somewhere in Georgia, and someone had open carry, and a lot of people didn't like it. We had the response there saying, there's kids out here out of respect, they should be covered up. You have get a concealed weapons permit. Some people thinking that these guys being cheap.
And it would make a law enforcement wonder, should I go ask him about that weapon he's wearing? Am I allowed to ask him about that weapon he's wearing?
Yeah, then you get those. I think it's better if you have the concealed weapons permit, cover it up. If you're in law enforcement, that's fine. You can display it. I just think it's better to have it. If you're hunting and everything else, that's fine. That's a different situation. But to walk around in public in a mall area, to have your weapon displayed and you don't have anything else, that, especially with the era of active shooters, that makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
I see that in this state all the time. There's two points of view. Me as a former criminal, I was doing nonviolent crimes, but I was stealing a lot of jewelry. If I saw somebody armed, especially in public, or if I was going to do something, I would give pause, even if it was a citizen. I don't know if this guy's a Olympian shooter, a target shooter. I don't know if he's off-duty law enforcement.
Sure.
So I'm going somewhere else. So there's the deterrent value.
Right.
However, to your point, putting it concealed is the element of surprise. Now the guy that's a robber, he doesn't know he's about to get his head blown off.
I think it's better to conceal that way. They don't know what you have. Or if you're a bad guy, you see this guy has a weapon, they may go after you first.
Listen, we don't have the internet obviously in prison, and all this is new to me. So I found a channel. I'm going to give the guy a shout out. He put some great content up called The Real Brooklyn Patriot. He's on Instagram. He puts stuff out there about all these murders and shooting, and it's the kind of thing you have to. It says like it's a sensitive content. Do you really want to watch this? And the reason why it's sensitive, and you watch it, and you're in law enforcement. You've probably seen all this stuff before, but for me, it's new and it's astounding how somebody can jump out of a car, walk up to the back of somebody, and it's all over. Lights out. I saw a woman do that on camera. She had a problem with, or robberies where the guy walks in, he thinks he has everybody in check. He turns his back on one customer with a gun, and the guy shoots him like 10 times. And then another guy ran off the sidewalk. He got shot in the shoulder. He tried to rob two women. The guy they were talking to was armed. So while he's trying to get stuff off the women, this guy grabs his gun out, point blank, hits him in the shoulder. So the guy runs. He spins, but he runs to the curb, and the guy hits him again in the back. I thought it was only in the movies. This guy sailed easily 6 foot off the curb and landed on his face dead. I've never seen anything like that. I was like, oh, my God. I don't condone violence, but he was sticking a gun on two women. And he had an armed citizen that immediately ended the threat because these women could have been killed.
Now, I think it's always best to be concealed if possible, but you don't want people to know what you have, right? Yeah. Because these bad guys coming in, they'll come at you and get rid of you. So be careful.
Let's wrap this up with these two last big, huge cases in the news. The head of Wagner Security.
Well, that is unbelievable. Where is Yevgeny Prigozhin? Where is he now? He was supposed to be in Belarus, right? Lukashenko brokered this deal because they were trying to pull off this whole march to Moscow because they're livid because they lost. He lost half his guys, 25,000 with the Ukrainian war in months. Livid. This war was being mismanaged. There was no way they can win it. He was very upset. And remember, he was Putin's guy, a mercenary for the dirty wars in Central Africa, in Syria, other locations, and then in Ukraine. And this was a complete mess, a soup sandwich, right? Disaster. They're just getting massacred, mowed over, and they know where it's going. And all of a sudden, they brokered the deal. He was only, I think, like 20 miles from the Kremlin. 20 miles from the Kremlin.
He should have kept going. He almost took over Russia.
It would be a civil war and a bloodbath. And the point was, okay, they take it over, then what? Anarchy in Moscow and Russia? I don't think he wanted that. So he brokered some sort of deal. Lukashenko got him out in Minsk. But I think he went there briefly. They were going to build a camp. He was supposed to sign, what I was reading, a contract with them to do, because remember, he's also a brutal dictator who don't know. And then he's supposed to squash any opposition groups. In other words, no democracy. You oppose me, I'm going to squash you just like I did for Putin. I'm going to do the same thing for you. And he's now allegedly he's disappeared. And now the Russians, if you haven't seen this, go check the raid they did in his apartment and all the weapons they found, money, gold billions in there. Also, all these wigs. He has all these exotic wigs to conceal himself, how he looks. Just look at the video of the raid and what's going on there. Very strange what's going on. So, I mean, at one point he was the most wanted man. Then he's okay. Now we're doing a raid again. This makes Putin look very weak.
2 or 3 weeks ago, he was on the verge of overthrowing Russia and kicking Putin out.
Yeah.
It confirmed that Putin had already fled. He already got on a plane and left.
Yes.
Had the country probably if he wanted to because the war's unpopular. I said when he brokered a deal to go to Belarus president's a puppet of Russia.
Putin, yeah.
He's going to disappear. He's going to be killed over there.
The only thing is maybe they're hiding somewhere, and if they don't get what they want, maybe they'll try again. Maybe they're trying to get more leaders on his side. It makes Putin look very, very weak. Very weak in Russia.
They released a photograph there's a photograph going around of this guy. I can't pronounce his name, the guy, the head of Wagner, sitting in a tent in his underwear. And they're trying to say it's a current photo of where he is now, that he's safe and sound somewhere. But it was like a field tent, a green tent. I don't know where he was, when the picture was taken, but that's what's going around the last day or two.
I think that needs to be, people need to look at that. That's a serious problem in Russia. Two things happened. They already killed him. They did this raid. They tracked him down, or he's hiding somewhere really secret. And that's a big, if they have no control, he hasn't signed this contract because they want him under contract. They want to control him more because he had no contract. If he's still a hired gun and he's out there, that's a problem that Putin has hanging over his head that he needs to watch his back, and that could be a disaster for Russia. I think it's a good thing for the Ukrainian people, and they're fighting for their independence and their freedom, which they rightfully deserve. And of course, you probably saw the disaster with Biden, which have Joe Biden one and done at NATO, his speeches, his cognitive skills. You don't even know what he's saying anymore. I don't know how he can last as president. There with King Charles, you see him there going off on one end there, talking to some of the guards, and he's trying to get him to go otherwhere, and he just can't get focused and go where he's supposed to go. I just think
he's walking in front of the king, which is a faux pas over there. That's definitely breach of protocol.
He breached every protocol, breached everything. He just can't. He can barely even go anywhere. You have to direct him everywhere. He's really.
He was asked a question,
80-year-old,
like a routine question. I think about America. I forget what it was, like 2-3 days ago, and his answer was a bunch of gibberish. That was something like, yeah, when you climb Mount Everest, and yeah, that's what it was, you know. And then Congressman asked somebody who they're investigating his competency, and he had it on the screen. The sentence he said. They asked the Democrat congressman, "Can you tell me what that means?" This man has his hand on the nuclear button. He can't even get it out anymore.
No, he can't. And if this was a Republican president, the liberal media will be all over this, and they're covering this up. Look how they were with Dan Quayle with Potato, just with Potato, and some other things he did. How they were all over, and he was a very competent guy also. And then of course Sarah Palin, you know, they gave her no break, but they were a lot better than Kamala Harris and these two put together. I mean, these two are just. I mean, her with her cackling, and you listen to what she says, you can't understand it. So neither one of them can put a sentence together. They both are just word salads.
He has cards. He has cheat sheets when he does press conferences. They tell him the bullet points that he exactly needs to say, and which journalist to call on. Yeah. He's not allowed to make his own decision.
It says
he'll go, well, this is what they told me to say.
Yeah. Manchurian candidate for sure. You do this, you go left, you say hi, you turn around, you go. I mean, that's the president and a Democrat, because he supports their liberal policies, they'll tolerate anything. But no, they have to call this guy out for what he is, a guy that's already unfit to be president. Maybe they're going to have to remove him because of his mental fitness. He's not mentally healthy.
He's got the border wide open, and now they're getting ready to release a bunch of children with tuberculosis into like 40 different states.
Yeah, that's an issue. That's an issue there, which is lack of security for a country, the border. Even RFK Jr., who's running against him, sees how critical it is to secure your country, national security. We don't know what's coming in. It will have impact not just for terrorists, but also health issues, everything. And then it's a burden for all these states to educate these kids, right? Where does it all come from, right? So it's a lot of problems there. I think RFK Jr. can't. I know he has some of these conspiracy things, which I don't agree with, but at least he did see that the part which you talked about before on the last show, that Fauci and others were too extreme with what they did. They ruined our economy. Many of the blue states crushed their economy, while the red states did better than others. But still, I mean, this is about health, financial. This is about independence in choosing what you want. Do you want to vaccinate or not be vaccinated? And that's what mandated.
With his incompetency, it's even beyond politics, because like with the Ryan Modell, the murder case in Florida that DeSantis is not helping with, murder is murder, no matter what political party you belong to. Murder is murder. We all agree it's wrong, and murderers need to be held accountable. And this is incompetency at the highest level of the planet, the strongest country in the world. He needs, in my opinion, to be removed from office.
Yeah, he does.
Fortunate we're going to get somebody almost as bad, but at least she might be able to string together a sentence.
I don't know anymore. I see her. I think she's as bad. So that's the problem, is that she's worse than him in many ways. So both bad. And then, of course, you have Trump about being indicted for a third time. different venue. So he's in hot water and he's in trouble. So I don't know. I don't like any of the scenarios I'm seeing. DeSantis may be there. RFK Jr. might surprise the world, shock Biden, and maybe win the presidency.
There's something on today. I just caught the news before we started, where Congress is taking a vote about censure, and it had to do with him. I don't know what they're trying to do. I didn't catch the whole story, so that might be interesting to see what was going on today. But
Censure Biden.
No, it has something to do with RFK and censoring somebody, and a lot of Democrats were saying no because this violates the rules, and like they follow the rules. So, no. All right, let's roll into this other last story here. Breaking news: explosive situation.
Yeah, that's tied in with Russian incompetency, years and different administrations, military emails, sensitive emails going to Mali, the country of Mali, which is an adversary, an ally of Russia, right? And all this sensitive information, maybe not all classified, but sensitive, people's financial information, medical records, other conversations, private conversations, going to a foreign government because of an issue with an email being sent with ML and let it go to Mali instead where it should have gone with the military, stayed in-house. But this was, what I was reading, whistleblowers have been saying this for years. This is a problem. This is a problem. And now it's been millions and millions going over there. So obviously in the wrong hands, adversaries can find ways to take advantage of any kind of information. It's a sad it happened that's going on, but there's something else we got to watch out. And, Biden's been in power for the last 4 years too, almost 4 years. So other things we got to watch out for this administration.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about the whistleblowers in that case that probably were ignored as they usually are.
Yeah.
We have earlier today, I saw some clips of the FBI whistleblowers that are now coming forward about the FBI higher levels deliberately suppressing investigations against the Bidens, specifically against Hunter. Now, this one guy was saying that even now, because he came forward, his supervisors will not return his phone calls, will not return his emails. And so one of the congressmen asked him, so how serious is that? He said, it's very dangerous. We're running investigations all over the world. We're interviewing people all over. We have to run certain things by supervisors, and they're putting lives in danger. Agents' lives, people's lives. They're not responding.
Roblox. They've been saying, you're a problem. Shut you down. We're going to remove you. And I've seen that firsthand too. Anytime you buck up against management, it's their way or the highway. They're their own little dictatorships, and they don't like it any other way. And this is what they wanted. And a lot of them want to promote, so they don't want any ripples, no waves, right? They don't want any problem because they want to keep on becoming a SAC or higher up, and that's a problem for them. That could hurt their careers. So now you're putting the spotlight. You're hurting my career. I got to shut you down, type thing. It's sad. I heard the IRS whistleblower saying the same thing. They had put more charges against Hunter Biden, right? More serious felonies than what he pled to me. He got a sweetheart deal, no doubt about it. He got a sweetheart deal, misdemeanor, and I can tell with the gun charges, that's a strong felony, up to 10 years. He has a drug addiction. He lied about it. He got the weapon. He could have committed suicide. He could have shot somebody. He was unfit to have that firearm, no doubt about it. Right. And look at the situation there. He lied in the form. It's a federal form, ATF form. I did a lot of cases like that also, where you have to fill out the form. If you lie in the form, that's a felony. So. And
don't forget the cocaine just found in the White House, and the Secret Service sweeps it under the rug. No investigation. That area, it's not tourists. That area is not accessible to tourists. It's accessible only to family and staff. They mapped it out perfectly on TV the other day. For people that work in the White House, that area is only accessible to family and staff. And it could have been a drop-off area where somebody goes to get high, it's off camera, and then they leave in their cocaine in there and forgot about it. Or somebody, I think one of the scenarios was there's a lot of drug dealers on bicycles these days. I don't know. I've been in prison.
It's not the greatest area. That's
and correct. That they could have got some kind of temporary access to leave something in there for allegedly Hunter Biden or somebody else, and then they would come out of the White House and pick it up.
I'm surprised they couldn't find any sort of, I don't know how much investigation they want to do on it, any prints or DNA or what have you, but obviously they don't want that more headache. And they find out, we know he has drug problems, he has addictions, he has issues with crack cocaine, every other drug. But allegedly during the Carter administration, Willie Nelson said in one of his interviews that he smoked weed up in the White House himself while he played guitar out there. So not the first time. Probably won't be the last time either.
Yeah, it's completely crazy. Like you said, the whistleblowers get ignored. The IRS whistleblowers get ignored. They all have the power of pardon. So on Biden's last day out, there's going to be a stack of them signed for himself, his son, because most of these charges we're talking about are federal. Now, the same thing with Trump. If he gets in, he could pardon himself, or
He could, maybe.
he could wipe the slate clean, and nobody's going to cry because, well, Biden just did it.
That'll be an unbelievable scenario. What would happen if he did win the presidency again, and he's convicted? Does he have to stay incarcerated as president? I mean, I've never seen a scenario like this. How would this play out? That's just unreal.
And they're real serious charges. I think one of them carries like 120 years or something.
Well, the classified the documents one. What I was reading was that he even had Mar-a-Lago after he was told to return it, and they weren't declassified. They were still classified. He knew they were classified. He kept them there, even on the operation to invade Iran. He had the operation how to invade Iran in there. And what was he doing with it? Was he going to plan to write a book? What was his motive, knowing that everybody know? I mean, I dealt with classified documents. Everybody does. You keep it in a SCIF. You keep it in a secure location. Why would he have an unsecured in Mar-a-Lago?
What exactly is a SCIF for the uninformed?
A SCIF is a location where you're supposed to only keep it there secure. And a lot of times you keep it in a secure safe. I mean, you're not supposed to walk around. You're not supposed to keep it in your personal house. Classified documents.
I was a locksmith and safe and vault technician, and I remember some of the high-end file cabinets. You had Sergeant and Greenleaf Group 2 combination locks on most of these things that have like a safe lock on some of these file cabinets, right? So a lot of these ones that were for documents like you're talking about, they would be built differently where you couldn't be subject to a radiological attack, which would be able to read the wheel pack inside. And then the wheel packs in there were not made out of traditional brass. They were made out of plastic, which for somebody who knows how to manipulate a safe like I do, you couldn't with readings. You couldn't quickly break in those safes. So they had additional protections on stuff that had secure documents.
He had none of that. He had in a room in Mar-a-Lago people had access to, and that got people's attention. I think that is probably the most serious case against him. Yeah. Based on, I mean, paying the porn star, that's I don't know what's going to happen with that there, because so many years ago, statute of limitations, some of the charges were going on there. So I don't know. And the one out of Georgia influenced the election, that could be a tricky case. But I think this is, even his former Attorney General Bill Barr said this is a case of major concern. Mike Pence says nothing I can say to he said I can't defend him on this one. This is his former vice president. Said, I can't defend him. So I think this is the most serious case.
What was the accusation in Georgia? Is that where he said, find me the votes?
Yeah, all that. Yeah, voter tampering.
But he said, find them. I believe.
I don't know all the ins and outs.
Votes. I don't think if that's all he said, that rises to the
level. I think there might be more than that. What's going on there? but I think that's why I said out of those two. But this is the most egregious case. The one out of Florida, Mar-a-Lago. That's one. But my thing is, if convicted and he gets, let's say, 40 years, let's just throw a number out there, whatever he gets, right? Mishandling classified documents is a serious felony. What's going to happen if he wins the election?
He's still allowed to run for presidency. He's the most popular. Yeah. He will win. He'll pardon himself on the federal stuff, and the second that they have a Republican governor, and he'll get pardoned on the state stuff.
He'll just come in and pardon himself for everything.
This stuff with
I don't know. It's insane.
With the Bidens and Trump is just too divisive for the whole country. It's in everybody's best interest to start issuing pardons and get this over with.
Yeah, but however, in the election is next year. He could be convicted. Well, he's going to try to buy as much time as he can.
Of course,
he, if he can. But remember, the first trial, I think it's set up for next May, the first one. So he's got trials, convictions, and he can file appeals and everything else. Where is he going to be when the election night comes around?
The one in New York, the prosecutor who said
for that one. Yeah,
he is
Stormy Daniels.
He's targeted an individual in search of a crime. That's it. He said
I think are the three
down, and he illegally went about doing it. So.
That's the weakest. I think the strongest case, obviously, is because they have the search warrant and everything else. Those other two, I think,
the prosecutors out there, my personal belief, and a lot of Democrats don't like this, as well as Republicans. Alvin Brown is a clown. This guy is a.
You need stop doing political cases and go after really. But you have enough violent criminals in New York City. Go after the worst of the worst. And that's where you want your most bang. Don't do this political cases.
Bragg won't do that. He lets them murder citizens on holdups and rob people and tourists. People are fleeing New York City. The tourists
escape from New York.
because of
No,
Alvin Bragg.
That's why it's called Escape from New York, and they all come to Florida.
Yeah, that's why I'm having trouble moving back to Florida. It's so damn expensive now.
Yeah. It's South Florida is out of control. You're better off finding somewhere in Central Florida for sure.
All right, Ignacio, my
Thank you, bro.
co-host, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to wrap this show. Ignacio's books are available on Amazon, my books as well. Check out his books. We'll have links in the description.
Yeah.
And checking us out on Steal Spotlight TV, this is a growing channel, and the public relations firm is growing. We had a massive success representing Laura Leone. She, on her own efforts as well, because she's incredible, and with the help of the press releases we put out and the marketing and being on my TV show, her first ever children's book became an international bestseller and a half out the gate.
Congrats to Laura. And I'll be on her show in a few weeks.
Yes, she's incredible. So now we're representing her also on her mascara line. She's got a vegan free, cruelty vegan, made in Italy. We want her to succeed. She's incredible. She's a financial crimes investigator, and her sideline is helping kids and trying to help women feel beautiful. So shout out to her. Thank you, Ignacio.
Thank you, man.
Join us next time with my co-host Ignacio Esteban.
All right, Bill.